Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of Rapid Recap here at Inside Nebraska. With me as always is Tim Verghese. Said the name right that time. Shout out to the YouTube commenter who was correctly calling me out for getting your name mispronounced. So, but your name is a lot like my first name, where it's like it's Z-A-C-K, but if you spell it with an H, I gave up caring. You don't care anymore either. And that's what I'm not even going to do a segue into what we're going to talk about today. Nebraska 40, UTEP 7. It was the Dylan Raiola show, but all right. Here's how I described it in my head right before coming on. Are you a fan of Star Wars?
Yes.
The original trilogy.
Yes.
You know, Star Wars: A New Hope. Episode 4 was like mind blowing. Oh, it's the new thing. This is what like the future of cinema. And then the next movie, Empire Strikes Back, was even better. Next week is the real what I believe will be the national coming out party, the national breakout game where
when all
we
the eyes
see
will
it.
be on him.
And that's more like Empire Strikes Back. Today was more like the original Star Wars, the first one that came out, where Dylan Raiola showed us exactly what we talked about after he was named the starter a couple weeks ago. Exactly what we saw in the spring game. He's got the keys to the offense. He runs it. I mean, that I'll talk about it in a second. But the discount triple check where he checked the play at the line 3 different times. We can get into that, but just fire off your thoughts at me from what you saw today from him.
Yeah, I mean, you saw the big arm, you saw the just the control of the offense, you saw the off-platform throws, the sidearm, like all of that. But again, like you said, I think what I think the fan base had to see, which you and I have talked about kind of all offseason, but what the fan base had to see, which we got to see today, his control of the offense. Like again, like taking the checks, taking the safe throws. You saw, he put the ball in harm's way one time by my count. It was one kind of crossbar. Yep, one crossbar throw. But besides that, every throw it's like, okay, it's either going out of bounds or it's going into the receiver's hands, or he's got faith in his receiver, he's going to throw it there. Kept the ball out of harm's way again, like you mentioned. Checks at the line.
There were a couple times on that point where it looked like he wanted to uncork one, but he had the discipline to hold it back and take either the throwaway or the safer throw. So that was more to that point.
And then reading through progressions as well. You saw him, kind of like quickly getting 1, 2, 3, 4, getting across the field and then getting back to his second or third read and throwing across his body and making that completion.
He was going high to low. He was going left to right or right to left, scanning the field. He was when they got in the one high on the big the Isaiah Nair 59-yarder. He saw that they were in a one high look and knew Nair had the matchup on the outside one-on-one, and he not only looked off the safety, took the time to patiently, with composure, just do that look the safety off, and then turn back and unleash one deep. And what was just as impressive, perhaps more so, is he didn't even flinch when he had a defensive end bearing down on him, coming off the right edge. He stood in there, knew he was going to take a shot, and just flung it up there to where he slung it up there to where Nair could just run underneath the ball and grab it. He powered his way through 2 defenders, showed balance to get to the end zone, and those are the extremely exciting, explosive plays that we've been anticipating all offseason, and now today they were here.
Yep, and I think an understated part of his performance today, I think, is the offensive line held up. I think you saw some positive, steps forward from Turner Corcoran. The interior of the line looked strong. The Micah Mazuka, the addition of him, they were able to run the ball behind him. Justin Evans looked sharp at the other guard spot. But there were times where Dylan was pressured, and he's just able to navigate the pocket pretty easily. Keep himself out of harm's way, being able to keep his eyes downfield. Redirect some stuff downfield. I think you're going to see more of that down the line. Against some of these Big Ten fronts, Colorado's front next week. But I think it was just an understated part of his game, and something, again, Nebraska hasn't really had. It's someone that can really manage the pocket the way he does. That's something that you and I were talking. Adrian Martinez is...
Let me ask you, Tim, have you ever seen Adrian Martinez have a game like that?
I was about to say,
What were we saying? What were we saying? That you haven't seen that you haven't had a quarterback like this at Nebraska. That's what we got a sneak preview in my mind of, because next week is I don't necessarily want to say it's the real challenge, but it's a primetime game. Everyone's going to be watching. You just had this performance.
The stakes are high.
Shador and Travis Sanders just performed like they did, even though it wasn't a great all-around game from Colorado. They escaped with a win, and now that showdown is going to be a showdown in prime time right here. It's just that's the one we're looking at now.
For sure. And, obviously eyes are on that, but I think reflecting on this too, I think just talking about the offense in general, like what I saw, just, they've made an emphasis of, okay, we're going to showcase Dylan, but also we're going to play a balanced football game. 3 running backs had at least 50 yards today. We got to see all 4 of the running backs they've talked about all offseason in the first half alone.
I swear to God that you and I in the spring were talking about how you don't need a number 1.
You don't need a back. You can have 4, and it works. And we saw Dante Dowdle kind of carrying the load, the new addition, powering through, running hard. We saw Ramir Johnson showing a little I think me and Steve were kind of talking about it off air, but the shiftiness we saw from Ramir is not something we've seen before. He's always been like a shiftier scat back, but just the way he was making guys miss in the phone booth today is not something we've seen from him before. So curious to see more from him.
The shiftiness between the tackles,
yep.
more like you're
shifting,
talking about.
And just in that phone booth, like one-on-one, just able to make a guy miss and reach for air essentially. Something we really haven't seen from him before. Emmett Johnson broke off that long run on that triple check from Dylan we saw. I was curious to ask Emmett kind of what they saw. We weren't able to get that opportunity, but kind of broke one long. And then Gabe Irvin, it's been almost a year, if not more, since he's seen the field, just dealing with it, coming off that injury.
He had to feel awesome.
And he felt so, talking to him after the game, just the how cool he felt and how nice he felt, just to get into the end zone twice. From an injury he said himself, some guys don't come back from. This is an injury that he really fought to get back from, and he was just happy to see the field even in a limited time. And I think that's the role you're going to see from him this season, is more of that short yardage back, a guy that can just kind of plug between the guards, at least between the tackles, and kind of drive it forward.
Yeah, if you play college fantasy football, which I don't, but if you play college fantasy football, Gabe Irvin's the touchdown vulture, I guess you would call it. Just like an NFL fantasy. He had 24 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns on 6 carries, and the others had. Emmett was 8 for 71, Dowdell 8 for 55 and a touchdown, Ramir 11 for 50. And all told, they had 233 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns and 47 attempts. And speaking of that balance, which is one of the main key takeaways I want to talk about. Again, 223 yards rushing on 47 attempts, 3 touchdowns, and through the air, 284 yards passing as a team, 2 touchdowns. Raiola, official stat line, was 19 for 27, 238 yards and 2 touchdowns, no turnovers. 70% completion percentage, but we see that balance, and that's the formula. That's what they've been talking about. The complementary football is between that side and then a defense that was. We're not going to talk about the defense much because they
built what they did last year. It's the same. It's a veteran group. We talked to Ty Robinson after the game, and he even said, I think something we haven't mentioned yet. First season opening win since 2019, which for a guy like Ty Robinson, who's been here as long as he has, this was the first time he's getting to experience that in a bit. So, and for him, it was this is the first time in a while I've just got a veteran group. I know everyone around me. I know what they're doing. Nebraska hasn't always started off the season fast on defense. Even last year, it took a couple games for them to figure it out and start to play like the unit they became down the stretch of the season. But they pretty much picked up where they left off last year. They had one drive where they were caught up on their heels a little bit, but they adjusted real quick. They were able to subdue UTEP's tempo. They kind of adjusted to that, kind of overwhelmed their receivers a little bit. They weren't able to get anything on the ground. They had 56 rushing yards on the day.
And outside of that, you mentioned the big shot play. It was 7-0. Nebraska goes for it on 4th down. They don't get it, and then immediately UTEP comes back 3 plays. They went 13 yards, 12 yards, and then 42, I believe.
Yes.
And outside of the what's the stat line on that? It was a 63-yard drive. I could have sworn in total. It says 114 yards for UTEP in the first half. And outside of that 63, whatever the math is on 116 minus 63, or 114 minus 63.
It's been a day. I don't know if we've got that mental math in us.
The other 5 drives, I was gonna try to stall in my head so I could do the math. Whatever. It was a low total on the other 5 drives, and they stood tall. They didn't allow another point. They had safety. They had 2 forced turnovers. Well, they had the safety and the forced and the interception.
Yep. And Rule said after the game, he kind of hoped that that was counted. Well, they had two. They did have 2 interceptions and the safety.
Who had the other one?
Ramir Stewart and Malcolm.
Yeah,
so technically, they had 3 turnovers today. Rule believes that safety should count as a turnover because it did get the offense the ball back. But again, that's another big thing Nebraska kind of emphasized all offseason is finishing plus in the turnovers, and they did that today. Again, that's something that I don't think they did once last year. They kind of broke even. I don't know if there was a time.
The Louisiana Tech game, they finished with 1 giveaway and 1 turnover.
So perfectly even.
Yeah, 0. I think that was the only game.
So it's been over a year since they've done that. So again, this is how you play winning football. You know, they set the tone, and for this team, you know, again, in the past couple of years, you know, winning has proven hard. You know, so it's no small feat to start the year off with a win, a dominant win where, you know, I think Gabe Irvin said it best. It's a celebration of everything they did, the work they put in through the fall. You know, they got an opportunity to highlight some young guys down the stretch, some guys that deserved it. You know, Jalen Gramstead, he came in from an NAIA school, transferred in. His dream was to just play on this field. He got that opportunity today. You know, this was a dream come true for him. A guy like Gabe Irvin, you know what I mean? Like, hasn't played in over a year. He had an opportunity to come in and score 2 touchdowns. So for this type of game, you know, it's on the field, you know, the big takeaway is what we saw with the offense. But for these guys and this team, you know, getting to celebrate the way they did in that 3rd and 4th quarter means a lot. And I think it's something that this team can rally around and build on moving forward.
The other 5 drives, 51 yards in the other 5 drives.
There you go. There's the math.
It was killing me. It was killing me.
I was stalling for that.
I was barely listening to the last part.
I was stalling for that. Yep.
What you were saying, because I was trying to finish that off because it was killing me. I couldn't let that stand.
10 yards per drive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the Dante Dowdell had the fumble inside the 10-yard line, and UTEP takes over at throwing 3. And then what happens after that?
Nebraska
The defense.
safety.
I mean, Ty Robinson and Mekhi Bear. Bear gets the low leverage and just puts it under the O-lineman's chin, essentially, to drive it back, and then he takes him down the end zone, 9-7. After that, Nebraska scored, I believe it was 5 straight touchdowns. They had the one to Nayor, they had the one to Banks, and they had another one, I think, in between there right after that. I don't know. It's the fact that I'm having trouble recollecting all Nebraska's touchdowns in the order in which they came this game is a really good sign moving forward. Before Colorado. Any last thoughts about Colorado matchup, anything like that? Anything for today or looking ahead?
Yeah, I mean, we'll have plenty on the Colorado matchup coming up this week. I think one last thing from today, you know, I just think encouraging things even on special teams. I think that's just something to note. We didn't get any clarification or further clarity on the field goal or the kicker situation. They only attempted 1 field goal. It was a short one, and they got it. But Brian Buschini, over 2 punts, averaged 48.5 yards per punt. That'll do, you know, that'll do. That'll do. And Nebraska likes that. And then on the kick returner and punt returner, you know, me and Steve, we're talking about it up in the press box, but Nebraska hasn't had just positive gains on every single return in a while too. It's encouraging to see on kick return. It's encouraging to see Ja'Cory Barney just run upfield and try and create something. You know, not trying to do too much on the side, getting caught up, just moving forward, gaining positive yards, and then. Punt returner. Nebraska has one that seems reliable in Isaiah Garcia Castaneda. He hauled in some tough punts, a couple of those where he's just sprinting underneath to grab. So good to see that they've got 2 established returners, which again, for this program, in years past, that just hasn't been a thing.
Yeah, the 2021 season, was it? Where it was a disaster.
Just a disaster.
Last thought before we get out of here. Nebraska had 2.3 points per game, or 2.3 points on average in the first quarter last year, which is the worst in the Big Ten since Rutgers in 2016. 18 points per game last season, which is the program's worst since 1968. They scored a touchdown in the first quarter on their very first drive. And Raiola flipped a 2nd and 30 into a touchdown with the 19-yard to Banks, and then the sidearm Mahomes throw to Nair, and then eventually the touchdown. They scored 30 points in the first half, which nearly double what they had all game on average last year. And by the next drive, of the first drive of the second half, I believe it was the first drive, they had outpaced that. They had officially doubled what they averaged last year. So those are really good signs going forward. Again, primetime showdown next week, and you got you and I before Big Ten play opens up. But you get the 24-hour rule, you get to celebrate, talk about it. It was fun again to watch a Nebraska offense play, because the defense was really fun to watch last year, but the offense is joining them, at least for a day. We'll see what happens next week. But with that, we're going to get out of here. Encourage you guys to like this video, subscribe to the Inside Nebraska YouTube channel, get these videos dropped directly in your feed. Encourage you guys to go to InsideNebraska.com, where we have a lot more coverage of today and a lot more coming up in the following days leading up to next weekend. So for Tim Verghese, I'm Zack Carpenter. We'll catch you guys again next time.